Hi, hello, how are you? Craig Chapman here, and welcome to Brutally Roll Your Own Backend, a short video series on writing your own low-cost backend for a Delphi application. This is part 11, and we're going to continue from exactly where we left off at the end of part 10, in which we're going to build the internal create function for our CRUD class, and then we'll go ahead and build out the update and delete methods as well. Internal create is actually going to be quite similar to internal read. So we'll go and take a copy of internal read and we'll modify that out to be the internal create function. So let's put a copy here. We'll change this to internal create. Control-Shift-C to generate the header. And actually, I probably should have done this first. Data string. Data string, and let's just make sure that that's put somewhere sensible. So we'll put it next to our internal read. So there's our internal create. So from here, let's start modifying this out. So first of all, we don't want to do a read start, we want to do a create start. Though actually on the IDE at the moment they're doing exactly the same thing. So we have a create start call. And then we're going to build up our HTTP stuff. We're going to wire all of that stuff together. And we need to set our method as rmPost, because that's going to be the post method. And then we're going to clear the parameters, pass in the API key. There won't be any filters because this isn't the read method anymore. And we're going to insert into here the code which will decipher our data and pass it up. So then we've got call method. Let's get this padding sorted out so the whole thing comes back by one. Okay, so then we're going to call the method, and based on the result code, we're going to do create fail. And if it doesn't fail, we're going to pass the array, and we're going to call do create success and pass that array back. Okay, so that's our method. The only thing we need to worry about here is passing the data array up to the call. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the CRUD table, you can see here that we've got data equals request data. So this is our PHP code. We built this request data array, and the data property is the property which contains the actual data for the create method. And we did that so that we could pass parameters up in the body if we wanted to do that. In the case of the post call, we don't need to pass data up in the request body unless it's the data for the create itself. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a pair from this data string and pass that up. So we'll do our request dot, and then we can set the body to clear, and then our request dot body dot, let's see, I could use the JSON writer. Yeah, I guess I'll use the JSON writer. So let's do body.json writer dot, and then we do begin. Is it begin or start? Right end, I guess it's right start of object. So we're going to build an object request dot body dot JSON writer dot, and then we're going to do write key value. We want to write a property name. Okay, so we're going to write the property name as data. Our request dot body dot JSON writer write, and then we want to write a value. So where do we have a value here? Write value, and the value is actually going to be the data that we pass in, because that will be our array of rows. Then we're going to do request.body.json writer dot. What else do we have in here? Let's do write. We've done start object. Do we have an end object, or is it just end? Right end object. Okay. Now I wonder if we need to write. No, we're just passing up an object there. So we're going to create an object. We're going to set the property, a property of that object will be data, as a parameter, and then we'll pass in the value, which will be our data array, and we'll end the object and execute the method. So let's go ahead and do a hard coding on the form to call that. So what we'll do is we'll say f region client dot, why do I not have autocomplete? Do I have something wrong in here? Oh, it's the bracket. Okay. So f region client and f regions client. Let's get this right. Okay. So we're going to call create, and the string of data that we want to send in. Let's just manually create a nonsense entry to test this out. So we're going to have an array of objects, and the first object is going to have a str name field, and the value of that is going to be some junk, and that's going to be the only object, and we'll send that up. So let's try sending that as our record. I'm actually going to breakpoint that as well. Okay, so we do an add. Doesn't matter we type in what we type in here, it's going to be some junk, and we make the call, and it's finished. So let's go ahead and run the app once more and see if that data got inserted. Doesn't appear to have been inserted into the system. Maybe we should just add this as a string. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and build the JSON up by hand and add this as a string. So what we'll do is the data that we send in, we're going to parse that back out as an object. We don't need the IDX because we no longer have filters. O is a tJSON object, and we'll do O is equal to, and then we have this parse instruction down here, which I may as well save myself retyping. So we're going to parse data as a JSON object, and so that's going to give us the object, which is our data parameter. And then we're going to create a new object, so let's call this data. tJSON object, and we'll create data is equal to tJSON object dot create data dot add pair. We're going to add in on the left side of the pair, this is data, and on the right side of the pair we actually want the JSON object from above. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at that as a string. Data is having, oh, that's a name clash. Let's call it JData. Okay, and then we should be able to take a look at what the string looks like if we breakpoint here. So I'm not actually sending this up yet, but let's go ahead and see what we get. Get an error here. JSON object parse tJSON value versus tJSON object. Parse JSON value. Parse JSON value, yes it is. Let's do as tJSON object. So we enter some nonsense in here. Okay, we're calling our junk function. Internal data create, invalid typecast. Doesn't like that here at all, does it? Well, data is going in as an array, so let's parse it as an array. tJSON array, tjson array, and then we're adding that as an array. And I'm just going to change this from O to A just so that it represents an array. And let's see what we have. So the array parses, we create a new JData object, we add the data as a pair. Now let's take a look at JData and do toJSON, which actually gives us an object with a data property and our array in it. That's exactly what we want. So we're going to pass that in to our request.body.clearBody and our request.body.add. Now we're going to add in the jdata.toJSON, and then we're going to add in trest content type, and we're going to choose application JSON so that we know what type of data that is. So if that all works, then we should get some result. So let's go ahead and run this. Add. Some junk automatically gets added, internal task. So we're creating the JSON array, we execute the method, it succeeded, we have a results array, and the results array is still nil. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's done it. So what we actually need to do is send the API key up in this variable wrapped within the same object as the data. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that the case. So here in our internal create, we're going to go in here and we're going to add a new pair, jdata.addPair, and we're going to call the first one API key, and we're going to pass in f API key. Then we don't need this parameter any longer. Let's give that a try. So we already have a SumJunk entry in the database now, and I want to change that so that we don't confuse the result that we get. So we'll literally just put SumJunk2 and see if we can get that to run. Okay, so you see the SumJunk that went in from the REST debugger. We're going to add, it doesn't matter what we call it, it's going to call it SumJunk2. When we call that, internal create the object with the API key, send it up. Do we get any results? Yes, we're getting results now. Excellent. So when we run that, obviously we need to do a refresh on this, so I'm going to run the application again. And if we see SumJunk2, then we've done our job. Excellent. So let's go ahead and fix that up. In the form main, we're calling this SumJunk2. So what we're going to do here is simply pass in the input text, and then we're going to call fRegions.client.read. So what's going to happen is we're going to pass in our new entry, and then we're going to read all of the results from the database again to get a new list of entries. So if we go ahead and run that, and this time we'll add West Austin, okay, and take out my breakpoints, and there we go, we've got a West Austin. So starting to make more progress on this now. Let's go ahead and add in the delete method. So for the delete method, what we're going to do is more or less the same thing as we did for the create method. We're going to go ahead and take a copy of this here and paste it into our delete method. Instead of calling internal create, of course, we'll call internal delete. And for data, I'm going to set this up so that we can delete only one row at a time, which actually is how our endpoint is written currently. So we're going to go ahead and put in PKID as the parameter, and we want that to be an integer, I'm going to go ahead and say that that should be a native int because we're going to be casting from a native int. And I'm going to come back and modify our delete method up here to account for that. Okay. So let's have a copy of our internal create. And this is going to be the internal delete method. So this is internal delete. And instead of passing in data, we're still going to pass in pkid, native int. Okay, and we'll create the header for that up here in the class. And where is it? There we go. So now we're going to do more or less the same thing, but we're going to call delete start event, do delete start. Then we're going to build up our HTTP client the same as we did before. We're still going to pass in the API key. However, the delete request, we actually do pass that in as a parameter up here. So let's go and copy that back out of our read method actually. So here's the API key going in, and in the delete method, we'll put that back in. Okay, so that's our API key. We don't need to pass that in this array. Oops, did that wrong. There we go. So what we're passing in this array is going to be the pkid that we want. Actually, getting this completely wrong. Delete method doesn't have a message body, so we don't need the JSON. We need another one of these parameters where the name is int pkid and the value would be, let's see, int to string. Yeah, we're going to pass it as a string, int to string pkid. So that's the ID of the item we want to delete. And then we don't need this stuff, and this stuff. Okay, then we're going to call do delete fail if anything should go wrong. And if it should work, we do get an array, do delete success. The array doesn't have full records and it's just pkids, but it does send an array back. In fact, it sends a single ID back. Okay. So let's go ahead and try calling that. So we've got our internal delete is called by the delete method, and we're going to pass in the pkid of the record we want to delete. And then on the main form, in order to call that, we're going to go to the remove button, and the actual call is f-regions client.delete, and then we put in a pkid, but we need to get that pkid. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if list regions.item index is less than 0, then exit. So what we're saying here is if we don't have an item selected in the list regions list box, then exit. If we do have an item selected, we need to get its key. Now we did this once before in the list regions change. The way we did that is we got the object reference and then we decoded that into a pkid. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. We'll have var o is a t object and pkid is a native int. So we're decoding that, and then we pass in pkid, and let's do an f-regions client.read one more time, and I'm going to be brave and fly this without breakpoints. Let's see what happens. So if I want to delete some junk, I select it and click remove, and I get an internal server error. Excellent. Okay, so it didn't like something about our call. Let's go and take a look at what we are doing in the CRUD client. Okay, so in the internal delete, we're doing delete start. We're building up our this rm post, rm delete. That should do it. some junk, remove, invalid class typecast. Let's break. Where are we? So this is on the results array. Now I'm actually going to modify our PHP for this. So the PHP is accepting only one record to delete, and it's passing it back as encoded a single ID that we're passing back. However, I'm going to create a new deleted array. Deleted is an array. Let's see, how am I declaring arrays? Because I forget. There it is. So it's an array. And I'm going to do deleted equals ID, and then I'm going to JSON encode deleted. Now at some point in the future we can come back and modify this delete method to delete multiple rows, but for the moment I'm just going to make it pretend like it deletes multiple rows and send us back an array. So let's go ahead and run our client one more time. And you can see that it actually did delete some junk, but it errored out on parsing the result. So let's go ahead and remove some junk too, and you can see it's gone. Okay, so we now have a working delete method. Okay, so let's get on and create a update method. So we're going to do the same thing as we've done previously. I'm going to work with the create request this time. So I'm going to create a new version of internal create, and I'm going to paste that in, and this is going to be internal update, and we're passing in data. So I'm going to Control-Shift-C to create a header for that. I'm going to come up here and put this in as my internal update, create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so we're now going to change this out. Oh, I've gone into the delete. Here we go, update. I'm going to change this out to update start. And we're going to create the same HTTP stuff, and we are passing the API key as a parameter in the body, so that doesn't change here. We're still passing in data in exactly the same way as we did for create, and then we're making the call. The difference is going to be rm put, make the call, and this would be update fail, results array parse the results, update success, and then the dispose of. Now that should all work if I type everything correctly. So for our update method, which looks a lot like create, we'll go and take a copy of the create method, and we'll paste that in as our update method, and we're going to do internal update and pass in data. Now we need some data to call on the main form. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a, let's add a rename option. So I'm going to change the alignment of these buttons a little. I'm going to align this add button to the top, and I'm going to make it a little narrower. Okay, not too narrow. I'm going to do the same thing with the remove, and I'm going to align that to the top and make that a little narrower. And then I'm going to add a new button in here. And the new button is, let's do edit cut, make sure it's on this control. And that's going to be aligned to the top as well. And let's name it. So this would be btn rename. And the text on the button is going to be rename. And when we click this button, what we want to do is very similar to the add. So let's go and take the dialog that we used for the add method here. And what we're going to do is, we still want input text, but please enter new name for, and then we'll pass out the existing item's name. And the way we'll do that is we first need to check that we have an item selected in the list. So we're going to take a look at the remove region click. We need this check, and we need to grab our, we don't actually need to grab the object, but let's go into the rename click. We're going to check that we have an item selected, and the name of the item, old name, is going to be list regions items, the selected item. So old name is a string. We're going to say please enter a new name for, and we're going to put in old name, get a new name for this item. And actually I did want to get the PKID, so I'm going to go and get the little chunk of code for doing that. So O would be T object, PKID would be native int. So we're going to get the PKID for the old object. When we get a new name for the object, we're going to say regions client dot update, and in here we're going to put in int PKID, and then we're going to pass in the PKID that we get from the list, and then we're going to pass in a new name, the input text, and that's the end of the array. So let's go ahead and put in the PKID here, int to string PKID, and that will be the update method, and then we'll call read. So if all has gone according to plan, we come into our form. Let's rename West Austin, rename, please enter new name for West Austin. Let's call it Y Austin, and click OK, and it's renamed to Y Austin. So we now have all of our methods. There's still some potential error checking and things we can do on there, but all of our CRUD methods are actually functioning. So at this point we have a fully functioning CRUD client class, and in the next video we'll add the ability to add, remove and rename locations, and then we're more or less done with the administrative part of the app. If we have enough time, we'll start putting in some of the on-the-truck functionality. So my name is Craig Chapman, thanks for watching, and until next time.